Good evening, everyone. I'm Shivani Gupta. The farce that is the US peace deal in Afghanistan with the Taliban, handing Afghanistan back to the very terrorists they were fighting for 20 years, is now complete. Because the US-backed Taliban government that has now been sworn in is chock-a-block with terrorists, many of them carrying a bounty by USA agencies. Most others are on UN Sanctions List, designated global terrorists, or were former detainees at the Guantanamo Bay. Let me first break down the claim to fame of this government, the who's who in this terror cabinet. 17 of the 33 ministers are on UN Sanctions List with travel bans on them. 4 ministers are wanted by the FBI with a combined bounty of $20 million. 4 in the new government were detainees at the Guantanamo Bay. 20 members of the new council are mullahs or Maulvis. And 6 are products of the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya Seminary in Pakistan, also known as the University of Jihad. Let's take a closer look at the most wanted as far as this cabinet is concerned. Mullah Hassan Akhund, the new acting Prime Minister, has been in UN Sanctions List since 2001. He was the first deputy of the Council of Ministers, Foreign Minister and Governor of Kandahar back in the Taliban regime then, and therefore under many resolutions of the UNSC was proscribed for activities related to the Taliban. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, one of the new deputy prime ministers, was listed on UN Sanctions List in 2001-2 as he served as a senior military commander responsible for attacks on coalition forces, also a former detainee at Guantanamo Bay. Abdul Salam Hanafi, the other acting deputy prime minister, again listed in 2001 itself. He was the deputy minister of education of Taliban in the previous regime. He is also believed to be involved in drug trafficking. Clearly, there is no change as far as the faces are concerned. The same are back. Another one, Amir Khan Muttaqi, now the acting foreign minister, also listed by the UN. He was formerly the education minister, now a member of the Taliban Supreme Council as well. And the icing on the cake, Sirajuddin Haqqani. This man is now the acting interior minister, one of FBI's most wanted, with a bounty of $10 million US, also in US Sanctions List since 2007, for being associated with Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden or the Taliban, for participating in financing, planning, facilitating, preparing or perpetrating of acts or activities by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda and Jaish-e-Mohammed. This man is in charge of provinces in the country now and will oversee all of the governors. As we've already told you, the caretaker Deputy Prime Minister Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar is a former Guantanamo detainee. This cabinet also has a bunch of other so-called ministers who were previously detained by the US. Mohammad Fazil Mazloom, acting Deputy Defense Minister, Pashtun from Kandahar. He was a military commander during the fight against the US and he previously served as Interior Minister and Governor of Herat during the Taliban rule. He was taken into custody in 2002 near the Afghan border in Pakistan and held in Guantanamo for nearly 12 years. Abdul Haq Wasiq, acting intelligence chief now, a founding member of the Taliban. He was deputy chief of the Taliban intelligence. He was detained in a sting operation in late 2001 in Ghazni and housed in Guantanamo Bay. Mullah Khairullah Khairkhwah, acting minister for information now. He is said to be one of the founding fathers of the Taliban movement. Khairkhwah received his religious education at the Haqqaniya and Akhora Khatak madrasas in Pakistan. The US believes he had close ties to Osama bin Laden. In February 2002, he was arrested by Pakistani authorities, handed over to the Americans and after a short period of detention in Kandahar, he was transferred to Guantanamo Bay. Mullah Nurullah Noori, acting minister for tribal affairs. He was head of the Northern Zone and governor of Balkh, both administrative roles. Noori was handed over to US forces and imprisoned in Guantanamo in 2001. Now, this new Taliban promised an inclusive government, with women and minorities being represented. But everyone knows what has been announced. All-male cabinet with no ethnic diversity. They promised a government with people from various backgrounds. But their cabinet has no demographic variety, mostly made up of mullahs, as I told you. Taliban 2.0 promised rights for women under the ambit of Sharia. In reality, women activists and professionals have been hunted and murdered. Their biggest promise, which was the basis of the peace deal, was that they will not allow Afghanistan to become a safe haven for terrorists. The Taliban cabinet instead included all proscribed terrorists possible, members of the deadly Haqqani network as well. So clearly, this new Taliban government is one of the terrorists by the terrorists. Will it also be for the terrorists? That's the big global and Indian headache, isn't it? Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary MEA, Vishnu Prakash, former diplomat, Jonah Blank, former policy advisor to Joe Biden, foreign policy expert, National University of Singapore, and Sushant Sareen, senior fellow ORF. All of us joining on the show. I want to go across to Vishnu Prakash. Vishnu Prakash, you know, this is what the FBI had released on Sirajuddin Haqqani. What does this mean anymore? Does this or the UN sanctions list, do they mean anything anymore? What does the UN sanction list, what value does it carry anymore?
Shivani, good evening. It carries a lot of value. It accords a status symbol or a status to a terrorist, and the world of terrorists are now divided between two groups. Those who have gotten UN designation, it's a badge of honor, and then they are let go. So why do we say that it does not mean anything? It does. And again, Taliban had promised an inclusive government. They have been very inclusive. They have been very transparent. They have included all the masterminds of terror in the government. They have included the wishes of ISI in the government. So they have been inclusive in their own way. Nobody expected them to behave differently. The Doha group, which was the face of Taliban, which was speaking in a language that the world understood, has been cast aside, and it is back to square one. It is old wine in old bottle, period.
Yeah. So, I don't know, Sushant, whether to laugh or to cry. I mean, what is the condition of this so-called global war on terror that countries like the US claim to be, spearheading? All of them have come together and formed a government. I mean, this cabinet, which includes the 10 million bounty man, Haqqani, this is the Taliban spitting in the face of the US and global powers. Let me just clear this off. This means nothing now. This has no value.
No, it has no value at all. It never had any value because, look, let's face it. When the US decided that there was something called terrorism, there was something called terrorism. It started post 9/11. Before that, for example, India had been suffering terrorism, Pakistani sponsored terrorism. Some of it the Americans knew was happening against India, and they very blithely turned a blind eye to it. And they were perfectly okay with it, right? That wasn't terrorism. So terrorism is what the Americans say terrorism is. Now, you can do as much of lamenting as you want over what is happening. But let's look at what the American response has been. The State Department apparently has issued a statement or something expressing concern not over the fact that internationally designated terrorists and the most wanted in the FBI list and all of that have been made part of the Taliban government, but that there are no women representation in this cabinet. So obviously, as far as the State Department is concerned, this is not an issue for them anymore. Terrorism is not an issue. Terrorism emanating from Afghanistan is not an issue for them. Al-Qaeda is not an issue for them, right? Now they have created this new monster, which really is a very, very small monster called ISIS-KP, right? Now that is the new thing that they will now talk about. And to justify their sleeping with the devil himself, getting into bed with the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda and the Haqqani network, the Americans have created this new monster, okay? That is one thing which is happening. Let us also look at another thing which, they have a great genius by the name of Ned Price, who is the State Department spokesperson. The genius also told us that there is absolutely no link between the Haqqani network and the Taliban. They are two separate organizations. Now we see that almost 40% of this new cabinet, maybe even more, is made up of people who are Haqqani network. Now, is that part of Taliban or is that not part of Taliban? I wish Mr. Price, who did his utmost to damage India-US relations with his superciliousness and his obnoxiousness when he started speaking about vaccines and raw materials and all of that, has now done another thing by saying that, look, these two things are very different. Finally, this whole thing about terrorism, I think let's look at it from another angle. the Taliban will turn around and say that, listen, you guys were negotiating with us. When it suited you, you took us out of that list. Okay? Now you have yourself, you declared us terrorists, not before 9/11, but after 9/11, when we were into a war with you. We fought this war for 20 years. Now you have declared that the war is over. Now
so we are no longer terrorists.
How are we terrorists anymore?
No, we are not. We are no longer terrorists now.
Yeah, we are no longer terrorists. So, and the Americans will say, yeah, you were terrorists as long as we were having a war with you. Now you can go and kill 100 Indians. How does it matter to us? You can do whatever the hell you want to do in Kashmir. It doesn't matter to us. That is India's problem. Of course, it is India's problem. And I think we should be mindful of the unreliability of the US as a partner, not only in the war on terrorism, but also in many other strategic theaters that we might be wanting to partner with them.
Exactly.
I think that is the lesson for us.
Jonah, if I can come to you, of course, what Sushant says is the new reality now. All of these men will say, that was a difference of where we were at that time. We stand in different positions now. We are no longer terrorists. They anyways don't care what list they are on. But the Sirajuddin Haqqani notice by the FBI, by the way, says that he is wanted for questioning in connection with the January 2008 attack on a hotel in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed 6 people, including an American citizen. I want to understand from you, what happens to this? What happens to all of these men and the crimes that they have committed?
That's a very good question, Shivani, and I don't think anyone knows the answer. The fact is, as you've quite rightly said, that Sirajuddin Haqqani is one of the most wanted terrorists on the planet. And he is now the acting interior minister, or is set to become the acting interior minister of the new regime. I don't know how that is going to play out. I can predict that the line coming out of the Taliban will be, that was the past, that's not the future. Personally, I'm rather doubtful of that line.
Yeah, but will the US also just play blindly on? And how will the US, the other global powers, India have to respond now? I will come to that in just a bit. Pinakji, please stay with me. We're getting some breaking news, and that's Ashraf Ghani's first statement since the day he left Afghanistan. That was on August 15. He says, and I quote, "I owe an explanation for leaving. Left at the urging of the palace security. Leaving Kabul was the most difficult decision of my life, but it was the only way to keep the guns silent and save Kabul." Let me also bring in my colleague Anand Narsimhan. Anand, that's quite an emotional statement that Ashraf Ghani is making. I wonder how it will be seen by the Afghanis who, still have to deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Well, what he's turning around and saying is he didn't want a repeat of the 90s. He didn't want Afghanistan to go into a spiral of civil war and risk the lives of 6 million people of Kabul. That's what he says. He says he left on the advice of the palace security and the staff there, who said that you better leave because otherwise this is going to be horrific and there will be street-to-street fighting and more people will die. And he's also rejected the charges that he was seen flying away with a helicopter full of money. There is millions of dollars, and he's just left the Afghan people high and dry. He rejects those charges. He says, me and my wife, my family have been scrupulous. I'm open to a full audit of any of my belongings or any of what our properties, be it me or my wife, who's got her base in Lebanon, her home in Lebanon. And he says, I'm open to all a public audit, and I'll encourage and urge other former officials and political figures to do the same. He's also saying that he offers his profound appreciation and respect for the sacrifice of all Afghans, especially Afghan soldiers and families. He says he's been a strong advocate of the Republic.
Right.
But he's also saying that my commitment to Afghan people has never wavered and will guide me for the rest of my life. He's apologizing to the Afghan people, saying that I could not make it end differently.
All right, Anand, appreciate you breaking down that statement for us. I will speak about this in just a bit, but Pinak Ranjan, thanks a lot for joining us. I want to begin by asking you, now what do we do? Like, what does the US do? How does the US, the global powers, we'll come to India later, but how do they deal with a government that's basically chock-a-block with the very men that they wanted to hunt down?
Well, I think the US will have to take the position that they are now a reformed terrorist. This whole group are now reformed terrorists, this Taliban 2.0. They did that earlier when Trump started the negotiations, they were with these people only, Baradar and the gang. So I think they are taking the position that we wanted to get out of Afghanistan by hook or by crook, and we don't care whether the terrorists take over or whatever. As long as they don't hit our homeland, we are happy with what they do in the region. That is, they have thrown all of us under the bus, basically, saying that you can get hit by terrorists, etc. We don't care. And of course, they left it to Pakistan too. They gave Pakistan quite a free hand, actually.
Yeah.
And that is why you saw the ISI chief, smiling with a cheesy grin on his face, and openly, sitting in Kabul. He wouldn't dare do that if the Americans had not given him that free hand.
Right.
So I think this is quite clear now that the USA has basically dumped this whole problem on the region and the countries around.
I think that was quite established. But what about the other global powers?
The other global powers are now maybe having a rethink now. I think the Russians are, from what I see from their statements, the Russians are certainly having a rethink. While they may be happy that the Americans are out of their backyard, but they cannot be happy because of this, cabinet and the fact that that terrorism is going to surge in this region. Yeah. And I don't know, even China is also keeping quiet. I haven't seen much activity from China.
Yes, so I will come to the question of China. But sir, I want your thoughts also on India. What does India do in this position?
Well, we have to keep our powder dry, as I have said before, and we have to be very, very careful in Jammu and Kashmir. And you can see some of the Indian leaders making these stupid and foolish remarks about the Taliban. And but then they are paying to the gallery. They are using their religious card, etc., for their own political as we say, roti sekna in Hindi.
Yeah.
So they are. That's what they are doing. So I think we are in a sensitive phase now, and anything could happen. I think, but
do we quote unquote deal with this government?
Well, no. I am not suggesting that we immediately recognize or deal with this government. I think we should hold it back.
Yeah.
Dealing does not mean that we don't use our, good offices or whatever and talk to them. Look, I want so and so. I want to send a plane to pick up so and so. Those are procedural issues. That does not mean that you give them recognition.
We are dealing with them or legitimizing them. Right. On the issue of reformed terrorists, Vishnu Prakash, I mean, that's the farce that is being pulled on us, right? Can this Mullah Maulvi government that claimed that they will be moderate, that they will not plunge Afghanistan back to 2001, can they be trusted to keep their promises? That's the big question, isn't it? If they don't hold true to anything they've promised, then can the US justify continuing to legitimize them?
Shivani, US has lost 2,400 of its soldiers in Afghanistan. A lot of treasure has been invested, lost. What have they done? Haven't they taken that in the stride and decided to work with the Taliban? The day on 29th of February 2020, the US had an agreement in Doha to say on the 31st of May 2021 they are out, and thereafter started negotiating backwards. They had already conceded that they cannot deal with the Taliban. And we have discussed it earlier, but again, what the world is doing is to looking at the symptoms. The symptom is Taliban. But what about the fountainhead? The fountainhead is Pakistan. But everybody is turning a Nelson's eye towards Pakistan, and they are doing what they are doing. So frankly,
I don't understand why that is the case. I think this is the biggest question we've all been dealing with. That, why does the US give so much strategic importance despite its position in the subcontinent region, which is of course critical, but why does it keep doing and failing with its Pakistan policy?
Various reasons. Too big to fail. A nuclear power does our work, at times behaves. If there is hope, we are training them. The big power can justify anything. And if they are in the business of justification, why can they not justify that this Taliban, they will declare the new Taliban to be reformed, and they will start dealing with them? I think sooner than later we will see that a lot of slack will be cut to them. Talking of global terrorists, Hafiz Saeed has a bounty on his head for $10 billion. He's going around scot-free. So,
it's a farce, really, overall.
Yeah,
Jonah, let me just give you a final word also. Like, why is it that this policy on Pakistan doesn't change? India has called Pakistan's bluff, especially, that nuclear bluff in recent times. Why can't US just find a better way to have its presence in the subcontinent? A more honorable presence?
Well, if anyone can come up with a solution, I think any American president, definitely Joe Biden, would be all ears. There's really, I can honestly say, there is very little fondness for Pakistan's game in Washington. It's not as if the U.S. policymakers are unaware of these things.
Right.
It's merely the fact that it's so difficult to come up with a policy to deal with them. I've tried for 12 years, and I have to admit, if I had brilliant ideas, I would have offered them to my boss. It's really all about choosing the least bad option among several. I should point out, Joe Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, managed to find the worst bad option that was available, which was abject surrender to the Taliban. But most of the choices are trying to find the least bad, and it's still an option.
Like our guest maintained, Jonah, Taliban is the symptom. A US president wanting to get out of Afghanistan, I can still understand. What I can't understand is why they still mollycoddle Pakistan. I have 30 seconds left. Shashank, I give you the final word. Clearly, nothing is going to change. But if this so-called reformed Taliban goes back to its same old ways, will the US be forced to act?
Look, very quickly. Number one, when they were in their bad old ways, the Americans are very comfortable doing business with the Taliban. People very often forget what happened 25 years back. The Americans were ready to sleep with the Taliban even then. They didn't give a damn what the Taliban said about women, about minorities. Nothing mattered to them. It was only when there was hell raised inside the US that the Clinton administration withdrew. Secondly, on what Jonah Blank is saying, look, the point is that you can keep, indulging in paralysis by analysis. But the fact of the matter is that there are plenty of very good options on Pakistan, provided the Americans want to exercise those options. They've never wanted to exercise those options. They've always wanted to keep juggling these balls. And that is why all the assumptions under which they operate and they make policy on Pakistan have all come untrue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's time to junk them.
Doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's time to junk them. You keep making the same mistakes and expecting different results is the hallmark of being foolish. I will end it at that. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. But of course, that's the big question that continues to haunt everybody out of this Afghanistan debacle is whether the world and the US especially is going to change its tact on Pakistan. Thanks a lot for watching.